So I'm very excited to bring our penultimate speaker to the stage because he has so much experience in the space of both internet development and open data and comes from the heart of the hacker mentality that I think a number of our speakers have been talking about earlier. David Moore actually earlier said, you know, if the United States seems a little bit ahead on some of this open government stuff, it's only because we hacked our Congress. We didn't wait for them to give us the information in structured form. We did it ourselves. You should hack your government too. So I'm very pleased to bring up for this final keynote before Andrew and I close, Håkon Wium, who is the CTO of Opera Software and one of the early web developers. He's responsible for CSS, to talk to us about the power of open data.
Thank you. There we are. Thank you for your introduction. It's great to be here. I think it's a wonderful place, Barcelona, glamorous. We're preaching to the converted here. We're all converted, but it's good to come together to share our experiences, take notes, hang out in bars together, and do all the things we've done over these days. So the progress we've made so far has resulted in some very interesting sites. There are sites from the US, there are sites from the UK, and even, you know, United Nations, who some think of as a backwater place. They are there with data. Still, there's a lot of work to do. I think we all recognize that. I'm going to share with you some of the experiences from Norway, which is my native country. Norway, it's not quite Sweden, as there was a reference to. We're maybe not quite that well organized, but it's still a small country where we can have kind of the overview you don't have in a bigger country like Italy. Norway is small enough so you can make a phone call to a person if you need to talk to somebody, and often you can find an agreement. Sometimes you can't, though, and therefore you had to start some projects. I've been involved in some of these projects myself. I've learned some things about them. I'll first tell you what my conclusions are in a very distilled set of experiences, and then tell you a little bit more about how I've learned those things. So I think, for me at least, there's three reasons why public data should be public. There's a wonderful ambiguity in the world in the word public. In Norwegian, we have a similar word, offentlig, which basically means the same thing. It can relate to government, but it also relates to the people. So by saying something is public information, that should really be made public. And I think there are three reasons for why one, and why especially government should make those data public. One is that the public has already paid for it. Through taxes, we have paid for the collection of that data. Therefore, we should get something back. It's basic capitalism. When you pay for something, you get something back. The second one is the democratic principle that the government has a special place. It gives us laws. It has a very central place in our societies. And in order for us to function as societies, we should be able to look into what goes on there. And reading the data that they produce can tell us about what goes on. And therefore, I think to use a democratic principle, that's rule number two. And it's probably almost as important as the first one. The third one, creating new business, I don't think that's quite as high up on the list, but it is the job of the government to make sure there can be businesses too. And if you are able to create businesses based on public data, so much for the better. You can collect taxes in the next round. You have employees. You can, create activity, which is good for all society. I think that's quite widely recognized. There are also exactly two reasons, I think, why we should not publish some public data. One is privacy. In Norway and other countries in Europe, we have quite strong data protection rules about privacy, and I think those rules should trump the principles of open information. And I think Helen made that point in the panel here earlier today, that the privacy rules are in place and they should be honored. We can't really put all the hospital journals out on the web. There may be a day when we just do that. Maybe it wouldn't be so embarrassing if all our records are out there. You know, everything is open, but we're not quite there yet. So I think we should, you know, not put those journals out there quite yet. The other one is national security. There are some good reasons why you don't want to publish the you know, agenda, the schedule, the appointments for the heads of state for the next month or so. You want to protect some information for reasons of national security. I think that's legitimate. Outside of that, I found very little. Maybe somebody said, you know, in a kind of a bidding process, some companies will submit business confidential information. Okay, perhaps it could be confidential for a while until the bidding round is over, but then it should go out. I really don't see any other reasons. So the projects I've been involved with, this started really in 1994 for me when I was working at CERN. I'm also involved in this voluntary projects to put the Norwegian laws online. The Norwegian laws were available online, but you had to pay for them. You had to be basically a lawyer and pay the monthly fees to get access to them. And we thought that wasn't right. You shouldn't have to pay to learn that you don't have to, that you shouldn't kill somebody. I mean, these are laws we've all paid for. We pay our parliaments to make these laws, and we should obviously be able to read them. And if they're not going to give it to them, we're going to type them in ourselves, make them available. So I was working at the time for this man, the picture's a little dark, Tim Berners-Lee at CERN. We were sharing office, actually. Here's our computers. I was sitting on the one to the left. He was sitting on his next station over there to the right. So he had to pass me to get to his computer. So I was putting these laws online from my machine there. And he came by one day and said, "Håkon, what are you doing?" And I was a little worried. You know, I was supposed to work on technical standards and creating CSS and such. And I said, I'm putting the Norwegian laws online. Ooh, that's my boss. And his answer was, do you need more disk space? And that's a fantastic response, you know. And Tim has, of course, as many of you have seen later, also been very active in the open data community. And I think that's something that many technologists have. They're not there just to create and to play with the computers. They're there for a cause. They'd like for these wonderful projects and protocols to be used for something that benefits mankind. A more recent example from Norway is Henrik Ibsen's writings. This project, organized by the University of Oslo, they've been getting enormous grants of public money. I think we're up at 12 million euros by now, to digitize Henrik Ibsen's writings and to get to the original version. These are, you know, scientists doing great work, and they come through all now. Ibsen produced about 20 plays and poems and such, so they created sort of the authoritative version of Ibsen, but none of this has been made available online. They printed books. You can buy the books. The books cost about 1,000 euros for the complete set. It's a lot of money. Very few people buy them. They only sell like 100 copies. It's almost scandalous how they're protecting their information. And I think for us, for the open data people, it's a wonderful case study, though, of how you know, we can push the government to make general rules about whenever you give research money, you should also demand that the results are published. And published in 2010 means that they should be available on the web for free. I hope things will change here with Henrik Ibsen's writings. One argument that the university has been using, though, lately is that, okay, right, he died a long time ago, so his works are not protected by copyright. But still, in the copyright law, there is a provision about databases. And databases, you can actually get a new copyright if you collect a lot of data and put it into a database. So what the university is now saying is that this is not text, this is a database. So we have a new copyright from now on. And I think we're going to see a lot of those kinds of arguments. Again, I think, Helen, are you here? You mentioned that in your talk today. On the EU level as well, there's this kind of exception for databases. So I think we're going to see, people looking for ways out of those general principles, and we have to be aware of that. Certainly, I'm not going to let the Ibsen people get away with that rule in Norway, and I hope others will join me at a European level for that. Another very important type of information is maps. We have a long coast in Norway, and we have many sailboats and motorboats, about 500,000 on a population of 4.5 million people. And some of those boats run aground sometimes. And some of those accidents could have been avoided if we had access to good electronic maps in our boats. And the data is available. They have very good data all around the coast. To get access to those data, though, you typically had to purchase it from a private vendor. If you have a GPS unit in your boat, you buy a chip of some kind for hundreds of euros, and you stick it in, and then you can get access to those data. And those data were collected with public money in the first place. About 95% of the expenses that the government had to collect the data just come straight out of the national budget. And then they get these 5% extra as license revenue from the private companies that are happy to sell you the data, again, with a considerable markup. So as a consumer, you end up paying twice for public data. And you don't get anything. You get a little bit of massaging. Basically, they convert the data to your unit. But I think that can be done on a wiki crowdsourcing level scale. So that's another fight we're fighting at the moment, and I'm sure there are similar fights in other parts of the world. One peculiar thing about Norway, though, is that it's remarkably open on some regards. This is the tax information. Tax information on a per-person basis is available. So here's my tax information, if you're interested. This is what I paid in. This is my income, what I paid in tax, my total worth. So there seems to be kind of an imbalance here. This I would probably consider to be personal information, and it shouldn't go out. But we have a tradition for that. So maybe we need to actually take some of that information back into the private sphere as well. At the same time, it can be argued, why shouldn't this be public? I mean, you should be ashamed if you don't pay taxes. And you should be able to check that your neighbor is contributing to the general welfare of things. I don't know. I think there are some edge cases here that we don't have the answer to all of them. This is another question that I like to ask. I don't really have the answer here either. So I'm asking in this forum, I think we have some very strong people in the audience here, maybe we can think a little bit together. Should the public sector create online services? So let me give you an example. We really had to go down to the examples. We can't always just do generic principle. So here's a weather service, yr.no. It's pretty good. It gives weather service, weather forecasts for Norway and the rest of the world. So if you want to have some forecasts for your own place, you can actually type it in here and it will give it to you. I don't know how good their models are, whether it would work for Barcelona or not, but it's good in Norway. It's very popular in Norway. And this is created by two state institutions, the Meteorological Institute and NRK, the state broadcaster. So they have been using public money to create a wonderful service that's available to everyone for free. Now, the problem comes up when the commercial people, they run a company and they want to make a business on this. They take the same data and they wrap it into a commercial service where they have ads. The top there is an ad for some product. And they're saying, no. It's great that the government releases free data. They should. But they shouldn't create a service that competes with us. That's not the role of the government. I think the answer, I'm not sure, but I think the answer is that the government should be able to create service. We can't stop the government from creating useful services. But we can say that they shouldn't be allowed to If they create services, they should finance those out of their budgets. They shouldn't rely on external income. They shouldn't put ads and advertisements on their pages, for example. And they don't do that here. So I think this is a good example of what can be done. I would be more hesitant if the state broadcaster had big ads on their site. If comparable, if BBC in the UK had online advertising for gambling or whatever, that would be a problem. In Norway, the state broadcaster actually has pulled ads from this year. They used to have them. Now they're all gone from the weather service and the rest of their site. So I think that question can be answered. Another question is, should commercial reuse be allowed for data? And from what I've heard from talks here, it seems that most people think that we should allow commercial reuse for everything. I think I agree with that, but I'm not. I think also this example shows maybe we shouldn't in some cases. This is real-time data from Oslo. You can see here when the trams are at your place in real time. So there's a lot of information that's being collected from the buses, trams, and trains, etc. First, it's very expensive. They had to put in computers and sonars and radios and all that to get the system to work. And then they had to publish it online. And that's not just a one-time thing. This is a continuous update on a per-minute basis. So it's quite expensive to run. They're making it available for free on the web. That's great. But they're also saying, in their license, they're saying, you cannot commercially reuse this. Because we've spent a lot of money on doing that to improve our service. We don't want you to sell that to others. But also, they've also made some very concrete examples of what you can do with it. You cannot create a web page where you have Google Ads on the side and tram information in the main window. So you cannot create sort of your own traffic information site with ads. That's not allowed. But if you're running a business and you want to tell people how to, come there by train and what's the real-time situation at the moment, you can do that. So if you have a store, for example, you can put a little window there saying how to get to our site. So some kind of commercial use is allowed, whereas others, where you just try to take their data and benefit by selling ads, those are not allowed. And I think they've actually done some reasonable, they made some reasonable rules for the use of their data. So I think that the principle of we should always be able to create commercial services of public data, I think it requires a little more thinking in some cases, and I think this is one example. World Wide Web, we all know it, we all use it. It's been a Western rich world thing. That's changing, and I think that's relevant to our discussion here. I'm now changing tack a little bit. I want to tell you a little bit about a service that my company Opera runs, Opera Mini. It's not really product placement, but I can't tell you about it without mentioning the product. Some of you may know it, some of you might have it on your phone. It's basically allowing people to get web access from the average mobile phone across the world. A lot of people in this world have phones. Many more have phones than have computers. A lot of people don't even have the power to run computers, but they still have mobile phones. And at the moment, through our service, we are now processing 30 billion pages per month. That's a very big number, 30 billion pages. And the interesting thing about our service is that since they go through our servers that are placed in strategic places around the globe, we can get very good statistics on where those people are and what they're looking at, and what kind of handsets, what kind of phones they're using. And the list may surprise you. These are the top 20 countries that use our service. And you see Indonesia is their number 1. Russia, number 2. India, China, they're big countries. Many of these places are big. But Ukraine, for example, it's not that big. It's, I think, 50 or 60 million people. South Africa, Kenya is there. There's some countries that you don't normally connect, that you don't normally consider to be, forward in the technology world. But people are really using the web in these countries as well. If we dig down a little more, look at what sites are they going to. Indonesia here, we find that maybe some people will be disappointed here. They all go to Facebook. You know, there's this myth that about the poor fisherman who you know, goes out to fish and then checks with his phone which market should I go to get the best prices for my fish. I think that's more of a myth than a reality. They really use Facebook. But also Google. Google is a little better, I think, in a way, because if they go to Google and search for something, they get results back which take them to maybe the marketplace website. I don't know. It's hard to tell. Some of these other sites don't end up on our top 10 list, so we don't know so much about it. When it comes to handsets, in Indonesia, they're not using iPhones. It's a different world. It's a Nokia world there. Another country was mentioned yesterday, Syria. They're using Opera Mini 2 on their Nokia handsets, going to the same places, roughly, more or less. There are some interesting sites there. I'm not an expert on Syria. Maybe I shouldn't say anything about it at all. But there's this number 7, SyrianEducation.org.sy, which happens to be, I only learned that today when I checked it, you know, the Ministry of Education in Syria. But I think since they end up on the top 10 list, they must have some educational pages there. They must have something that people are interested in reading. But I don't know what it is. Maybe there are some people who can read Arabic in this crowd. Finally, web standards. That's really where I come from. My prediction is that because of the standards, the web is going to last for a very long time. And my prediction is that it's going to last for 500 years. And that's not a totally random number. It's a very convenient number for me, because it's so far ahead that I'm not going to be around, you know, so nobody can prove me wrong. But it's not a totally random number. This guy, Gutenberg, he's also on the wall here somewhere. 500 years ago in Europe, he invented the printing press. And that totally changed how information was distributed in Europe. And it made the Renaissance possible, the Reformation, the Industrial Revolution. It's really a great example of how information can change societies. And from Europe being a backwater place, it became the leading continent. And I think the web is going to do the same, not just for Europe or America or any other parts of the world, but for the whole world. And therefore, I think the name we're using for it, World Wide Web, is so great. If we had one of Gutenberg's Bible here today, we would know how to use it. We would know how to turn the pages, how to read it. Maybe we could have asked for a better font, or, you know, to make it, you know, you'd have to read German, old German to understand this. But the metaphor is there. The user interface is the same. So the book has been around with us for 500 years. And that's how long I think the web is going to be too. The web is, you can only really compare it to the invention of books 500 years ago. So I think the web is going to be around then. I think we're still going to refer to web pages then. I think computers you buy 500 years from now is going to be able to read the HTML that we produce today. Now, I'm not sure that, though, that Facebook and Twitter is going to be around. So just as a final remark here, I'd be a little bit concerned about putting too much pressure on politicians and people to be on Facebook and on Twitter. Because if those organizations go down, they may take a lot of valuable data with them. Thank you.